So when I was a kid, I used to go down to Brighton Beach. And this was the wave beach in Christchurch. And we would go out as deep as we possibly could, and we would jump up into these waves. And it was so much fun until it wasn't. Because one day I suddenly felt these different forces. I had these waves crashing down over my head, trying to push me down and back into shore. And I had this current that was wrapped around my legs. And I lost my balance. I had nothing to hold on to. And I felt lost, alone, unsafe, and scared. And for some of us, that is how we feel when we think about going to work on a Monday morning. Because did you know that 60% of our global workforce is emotionally detached from the work they do? And on top of that, another 19% are highly disengaged, otherwise known as utterly miserable. And you might think, well, that's global. We're surely better than that in New Zealand. Actually, we're worse. If you look at the data for New Zealand and Australia from Gallup, only 17% of our workforce is engaged. But let's make that mean something. We are in New Zealand, so let's have a rugby team. We've got 15 people. The game's about to start. The whistle's about to be blown. So our first three are already on the field in position, and they're rearing to go. They've done their warm-up and their stretches, and during the week they went to the gym because they were trying to increase their strength and build their skills. They were going to the coach with new ideas around how we can do things better. And they've got a real sense of meaning and purpose in what they do. And they know that when they step onto that field, when they put on their jersey, that it represents something greater than just themselves. And they're aware of the impact they have on others. And now we've got another three, and they're still hanging on the sidelines. In fact, they are dreading the moment that their foot crosses over that line. And their whole day yesterday was ruined because all they could think about was that they had to play today. They feel really unsafe, really stressed, and they might even be starting to badmouth the team to their friends. And their friends keep on saying, why don't you just quit? But they've been losing their self-confidence and their motivation, and they've got very little self-belief left. And they are utterly miserable. So that leaves us with 9. And they kind of wander onto the field. They're there. You know, it's good to get paid. They haven't bothered with any warm-ups. They didn't go to the gym during the week. But they'll do what they're told. And it's fine. You know, they don't really care if they win or if they lose. They'll show up because that's what you do. They're not going to bother coming up with any new ideas or ways of doing things differently, because what's the point? Nothing's going to matter anyway. And this is the group that term quiet quitting was made for. See, many years ago, I was that miserable person at work. I went from being someone who loved what I did, who looked forward to work every single day, to someone that just dreaded the thought of Monday morning or weekend. And I started having panic attacks at the thought of going to work. And when I was driving to work, I'd be having these panic attacks. And my whole life got really small. I started to retract. I probably wasn't much fun to be around. And at the time, I thought I was broken. But actually, it was my workplace that was broken. Because Gallup estimates it's going to cost the world around $7.8 trillion this year alone in lost productivity. And that's a ton of money. But that's also a ton of miserable people. It's a ton of potential not being realised, ideas not being put on the table, of creativity not being expressed. Because I don't believe people choose to be that miserable person. because we spend over 80,000 hours on average at work. I mean, the only thing we do more of is sleep. And I've never met someone who's decided on purpose, I want to hate my job. I want to feel sick to my stomach on a Sunday night when I think about going into work on Monday morning. And I want to count down every minute during the day because it's so painful being there. So something's wrong. And this is costing us because right now we've got some major challenges in the world. You know, we've got global pandemics and supply chain crises and accelerating technology that's going to impact what we do for work. And the biggest of them all is climate change. And right now, more than ever before, we need people doing work that matters. We need workplaces that work. We need to increase the number of people that are engaged at work, who want to be there, that they're expressing their ideas. And we can use that creativity to hopefully save the world. But there is a key, because what we know is that there's one factor above all else that makes a difference. And in fact, 70% of the reason why people are either engaged, don't care, or utterly miserable is down to this one factor. And what is it? It's the manager. And it's your manager. And if you're a manager, it's you. It's the team leaders, it's the supervisors, it's the department head, it's the executive team. It's the person that you report to that makes the most difference in how you feel at work and then how you perform at work. So if you are a manager, the power is in your hands, because it is up to you to change our workplace and hopefully save our world. See, I believe managers have 3 doors in front of them, and they get to choose what door they are the key to opening. But before we open the doors, I'm going to get you to do something. I'm going to get you to close your eyes and put your hand on your chest, and I want you to think about the best manager you ever had. Now think about how they made you feel. Okay, you can open your eyes, and I want you to hold that thought. See, the first door that a manager can choose to open is management by fear. And I'm going to tell you a story about Volkswagen, because a few years ago, they were on a high. They were performing exceptionally well, and most of this had to do with these clean diesel engines they were selling, particularly in the USA. The only trouble, it was a complete and utter hoax. You see, the trouble with diesel engines is that they have more nitrous oxide, and the US has quite strict regulations around that. So they wrote code to cheat the system. And the way it worked was, in a testing lab, only 2 wheels of the car are being rotated. And the software would recognize this, and it would turn down performance, turn down fuel economy, and turn down emissions in the testing lab. These cars would get the tick, but then as soon as they were on the road, as soon as all 4 wheels were working and rotating, performance would go up, fuel economy would go up, and emissions would go up, and they were significantly higher. And initially, Volkswagen covered this up and denied it until they finally had to come clean. And by that time, over 11 million cars had this cheating device installed. So what caused this? Well, it was the manager. And in this case, it started at the top and it permeated down to every level in the organisation. And managers and supervisors would manage their teams like they were being managed. And it was bullying, and it was toxic, and it was psychologically unsafe. And this culture of terror, of fear, intimidation is what has been identified as the root cause as to how this could happen. So when you open this door with management by fear, You might get some short-term financial performance, but you can also get cover-ups and workarounds and even fraud. And Volkswagen then had to pay billions of dollars in fines and have been on a journey ever since to rebuild trust internally and externally. Door number 2, I call this management by care. Because when I asked you to close your eyes before and think about the best manager you ever had, I bet you felt that they cared. The feelings you thought of might have been connected, safe, supported, believed in, challenged. And this is the doorway that leads to high performance. And this is the doorway that leads to workplaces making money in a long-term sustainable way. This is where people have meaning and purpose in their work, because this is where you feel that your manager, your boss cares, and that they care about you as a person and your whole life. They know what's going on at home. It's the manager that tells you about that amazing job you must apply for and that you would totally nail it, even though you know it's going to leave a hole in your team if you move on. It's the manager that believed in you before you even believed in yourself. And it's the manager that creates this high trust team that's psychologically safe, where if you make a mistake, your team members both commiserate with you and then you all learn together from it. And it's where you know that you have a safety net. So if you're going to go for those big ideas and try those new innovations, that if you fail, if you fall, your manager's the first person there with their arm out, helping you out and getting you back on the ladder. See, when you feel cared for, you care. You might be wondering what's door number 3. This is management by don't care. These are the managers that are just there, and it's probably about half of our managers if we look at the data. And it's not that there's any bad intent. In fact, that door's probably a bit ajar anyway, and it's quite easy to wander through without even realizing you have. And maybe they've never had a great manager themselves, so they don't know what good looks like. Or maybe they've got so many tasks and responsibilities and things on their to-do list, so the people side of things continually drops to the bottom of their to-do list. And what this looks like is for you, it's when your one-on-one gets postponed, cancelled or moved almost every month. When you have a 2-minute conversation about your career ambitions once a year at your performance review and then nothing's ever taken. It's when your manager doesn't know that your marriage is imploding or your baby doesn't sleep or that you're studying in your free time. They're just there and they just don't really care. And when they don't, you don't either. See, what changed for me all those many years ago, what made me change from happy at work, purposeful, confident, was a new manager. And overnight, all of my confidence, my happiness, and my sense of purpose just dissipated. And they opened the first doorway, management by fear. And this culture that had been warm and caring and supportive suddenly turned to one where we were pitted against each other, where internal competition was the norm. And I felt I couldn't trust anyone, and I felt I couldn't trust myself, because I thought I was to blame, I was broken. I was having panic attacks, there's something wrong with me. And when I look back at that time, I was lost in the waves for a really long time with nothing to hold on to. And it took far longer to rebuild my self-confidence and my sense of self than it took for those to be destroyed. So what do we have? We've got a global workforce that is mostly doesn't care or is utterly miserable. We've got a world where we've got these major challenges and we need our workforces working. But we have this key, and the key is these 300 million people that are the managers of this world, that lead us, that manage us. So I have a question for these managers, and maybe some of you in the room are these managers. What doorway will you open? How do you want your people to feel on Sunday night before they go to work on a Monday morning? Do you want them to feel that they're floundering in the ocean alone, that there's nothing to hold on to, that they're lost, that they're unsafe? Or do you want them to feel that you're right there with them? You've got your hand out for support. You're passing them a life jacket. That you care and that you're really there. Because in the words of Maya Angelou, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So how you make people feel when you're a manager is what changes the workplace and hopefully might even save the world.